Okay, we're diving straight into an explainer of a story that is, frankly, one of the most heartbreaking, claustrophobic, and mechanically complex survival situations in history. We're unpacking a deeply tragic, highly documented event that completely shook the caving community forever. I want you to imagine a genuinely terrifying reality. And to be clear, this isn't the plot of some Hollywood horror movie. This is a documented, true event. What if you were wedged headfirst into the earth, and turning around was just physically impossible? Every instinct in your body is screaming at you to squirm, to push, to escape, but every single millimeter you move only locks you tighter into the rock. It's an agonizing scenario to even wrap your head around.
And just to give you an idea of the sheer scale of this nightmare, 10. The passage he was stuck in was just 10 inches wide in some places. Think about that for a second. 10 inches, or about 25 centimeters, is basically the width of a standard dinner plate. Try to picture maneuvering a full-grown adult chest and shoulders through a solid rock gap that tiny.
But let's step back from the edge of that trap for a minute to meet the man who found himself in this impossible situation. This is John Edward Jones. He was a 26-year-old medical student, and everyone who knew him described him as this incredibly kind, intelligent, and deeply devoted family man. He had a young daughter, and his wife was expecting their second child. He wasn't out there seeking some extreme death wish danger, you know? He just had an adventurous spirit and really loved exploring the natural world. So how exactly did he end up there? Well, it was November 24th, 2009, literally the day before Thanksgiving. John was a pretty experienced caver, and he was back in Utah for the holidays, looking for one last thrill with his relatives. They decided to head into Nutty Putty Cave. Now, this is a famous lava-formed cave system, known for having some ridiculously tight squeezes. It was super popular with thrill seekers for sure, but it definitely carried a lingering, dangerous reputation because people had gotten stuck there before. But John knew what he was doing, and he felt confident. Right, so here is the absolute crucial turning point of our explainer today, a tragic navigational mistake. John was actually looking for a well-known, challenging, but completely survivable squeeze that cavers call the birth canal. But deep inside that maze of tunnels, he made a critical error. Instead of the right passage, he crawled headfirst into an uncharted, completely dead-end tunnel. The terrifying part? At the entrance, it looked almost exactly like the route he wanted, except this one just kept getting narrower and narrower. And that physical trap escalated in a terrifying sort of progression. First, as he shuffles forward, his chest presses hard against the rock. Then, step 2, his shoulders become completely wedged in. And then comes that inevitable panic response. Step 3, he tries to back out, but he has absolutely zero leverage. He pushes harder, and instead of going backward, the slick rock and gravity just slide him deeper and deeper into the crevice. He can't bend his knees, he can't free his arms, he's completely locked in. Amazingly, initially at least, John stayed remarkably calm and managed to call out for help. His brother Josh actually found him in the dark and desperately tried to pull him out by the legs. But the angle, it was just impossible. Every single tug caused John agonizing pain. Realizing just how bad this was, Josh had to make the awful choice to leave his brother in the dark, climb all the way out of the cave, and trigger a massive emergency response. This brought an army of over 100 rescuers, engineers, doctors, and volunteers straight to the scene. Now, what makes this specific situation so uniquely terrifying is the biological ticking clock. See, John wasn't just stuck. He was trapped almost entirely upside down. And that triggers a biological cascade known as prolonged inverted suspension. Basically, when you hang upside down for hours, gravity forces all your blood to pool in your head. This puts an enormous and eventually fatal strain on your heart, your lungs, and your brain. Every breath becomes a struggle. So just his position alone was actively destroying his body's ability to survive. Time was rapidly running out from minute 1. Meanwhile, above and all around him, the rescue teams were facing an agonizing mechanical nightmare of their own. Getting to John wasn't just a matter of walking down a tunnel. First, they had to army crawl through these incredibly tight passages for almost an hour just to do one trip. Second, they had to physically drag heavy medical supplies and drilling gear through that twisting maze. And third, they had to painstakingly build this elaborate rope and pulley system by drilling anchors directly into the solid stone walls of the cave.
But here's something truly incredible. Despite the horrific physical pain he was in and the absolute mechanical chaos going on around him, the rescue logs show us something amazing about John's mindset. He was actually joking with the rescuers. He talked about his wife, his kids, his faith. He really anchored himself in his deep love for his family and his steadfast beliefs. The guy remained unbelievably calm, thanking the people trying to save him. And honestly, he was the one keeping the rescuers' hopes alive when the logistics seemed downright impossible.
And for a brief moment, that hope seemed entirely justified. After hours and hours of grueling, exhaustive work, the complex anchor system actually did what it was supposed to do. They pulled the ropes, and John was physically lifted several feet upward. You can imagine the massive surge of optimism that just rushed through those narrow, dark tunnels. The team literally thought they had beaten the odds. It really looked like he was going to be pulled out alive. But then, in a devastating split second, everything changed. The fragile cave wall simply gave way under all that immense tension. An anchor bolt ripped completely out of the rock, and the entire pulley system instantly collapsed. All that painstaking progress? Gone in seconds, and the rescuers just had to watch helplessly as John plummeted backward, sliding even deeper into that narrow crack than he was before.
To really grasp the sheer duration of this struggle, we have to trace the timeline of events here. By hour 1, he is trapped inverted. Fast forward to hour 24, and the doctors monitoring him knew his exhausted body was hitting its absolute physical limit. He was still thanking his rescuers, still talking about how much he loved his family, but nature had put him in a position you just can't survive. Tragically, at hour 28, the ordeal ended. John died from cardiac arrest in the early hours of November 25th.
28. I think it's vital we just sit with that number for a second. 28 grueling hours. That is the stark, heartbreaking reality of exactly how long he fought to survive upside down, deep under the earth. It is just an unimaginable test of endurance. And right alongside that is this number, 26. At just 26 years old, this vibrant, adventurous life was cut incredibly short. The rescue teams, the volunteers, and, of course, most of all his family were utterly devastated by the loss. I mean, they had been so close, only to have the cave claim him forever. Now, because attempting to actually recover his body would have forced rescuers to squeeze into that exact same deadly passage, placing them at extreme risk, officials had to make a really difficult, highly debated, but ultimately necessary choice. Nutty Putty Cave was permanently sealed. They poured concrete directly into the entrance, making that section of the cave his final resting place forever. There's a memorial plaque standing at the entrance now. Just weeks after this happened, John's wife welcomed their second child, a little boy who would only ever know his father through stories. And I think that leaves us with his final thought for our explainer today. Are you only going to remember the terrifying, claustrophobic tragedy of his final 28 hours, or will you remember the beautiful, loving life he lived before the darkness? Some stories are known just for how they end, but maybe the true takeaway here is remembering the life that was lost. What do you think?